Hi, this is Ashley,
And this is Kristen.
and this is 1,000 Miles of True Crime. Hey, Kristen, how you doing? I feel like it's been a couple of weeks.
It has. How was your Thanksgiving? How was your holiday?
It was good. I cooked a whole meal for my family, so very exhausting, but I'm glad we're fully in the Christmas season.
Absolutely. I actually only had to prepare one thing for Thanksgiving, and I was very appreciative that I didn't have to cook anything else because I hate cooking. But it was a good time spent with family. So glad you had a good holiday break as well.
Yeah, I love cooking. I hate the cleanup after. I swear I'm still finding pieces of stuffing around. I'm like, ugh.
Sign me up for all the cleaning. I would much rather do that than cook.
Oh,
And
good. So you make a good team.
I'm also an awful cook. I wouldn't say awful, but I mean, like I have the recipes that I can make or whatnot, but not my area of expertise by any means.
I'm not gonna
Um,
lie, the last couple years we've just been buying from a restaurant and it's been so wonderful. And you just throw it comes in disposable stuff, you just throw it away at the end. But my little brother is actually back living in town and he sort of begged for a Thanksgiving dinner and we realized we hadn't all been together for 8 years. I will say I should absolutely not complain about cooking. It was really nice to have my whole family together.
nice,
Yeah.
nice.
Okay, let's dig into what I'm going to be covering this week. So this was actually a recommendation from a long time ago from at the time it was one of my favorite product managers and I actually love him and his wife. They both work for our company and they're so awesome. When he first started describing this case to me, I was like, what? I really thought it was made up or he was kind of messing with me. And then he sent me articles about it because they live pretty close to where this happened. And he's originally from Rhode Island. We'll find out that the person to murder in this case was actually from Rhode Island too. I think they felt like they kind of had this close personal connection to it. And it's a crazy case. Let's dig into it. And I'm just gonna go ahead and I will let's get started.
Dive right in. I'm
So
excited.
this case actually takes place in Massachusetts. I love Massachusetts. You and me have both been to Boston and Salem together. My team originally was from there. For a while, I felt like Boston was my second home. I want to give a shout out. I know we have a lot of listeners there actually, and not just in Boston, in Lowell, Bridgewater, Cambridge. I wish I could name them all, but thank you guys so much for supporting us. I know we have listeners in Groton, and that's actually where this takes place. So if you don't know, if you're not from the area, you probably don't know about this case, but I'm going to be talking about Orion Krause. How fancy is that name?
Ryan.
Orion. Orion Krause. To me, the second I heard it, I was like, comes from old money. It just sounds very proper. And one of the things I thought that was funny was that so he has a twin brother whose name's Cooper. And at first I was like, how are you going to be Cooper when your twin brother's Orion? But then I was like, I don't actually know any Coopers. So I guess, I don't, what do you think?
Yeah, I would honestly say those are two names that I don't think I've known or heard that name before, really. I've
Yeah.
never known a Cooper,
I
and
feel
I've
like
definitely never known the other name.
yeah, I don't know any Orions. I feel like Cooper's a name that you'd hear on TV shows in the 90s, but other than that, I don't actually know any. So they get points. The parents get points on creativity. They were both born February 17th, 1995. So they're Aquariuses. I know that because they were born a day before me. I think this will probably help, at least Orion with really being creative. And we're going to find out that he is really into music. He seems to be very gifted in this area. They really had a comfortable childhood. They first were in Monhegan Island, and this is a tight knit fishing community. And it's really everywhere they live, they kept talking about how these were artist colonies. And these really are artists go there, they're always painting there, things like that. So they were really raised in this rich, artsy environment. And this is about 12 minutes off the mainland. And then they would move more mid coast and they would end up in Rockport. Both of these are just, if you imagine Maine in your head, this is exactly what you're going to see. And their father Alexander Krause was a tuna fisherman, and he also would catch lobster, so he's a lobsterman. And eventually he would switch professions and he would turn into a ferry boat captain. Not very far off, but again, seems to have a very quaint upbringing. Their mother, Elizabeth, I love, goes by Buffy. So her mom was Elizabeth too. So I don't know how they ended up with Buffy, but I love it, of course. They came from, she came from a wealthy background, and this allowed her to be involved in various community and charitable endeavors. I think she was just helping run these organizations and stuff, not truly working a 9 to 5, but being able to really, help out in her community and with these different outreach programs. I already said Krause showed signs of just being really gifted and talented musically from almost the very beginning. He really seemed to show signs that, this is what he loved, this is what he was passionate about. And he would practice all the time. We're not just talking your normal kid. Even I think of a really dedicated kid maybe practicing every day. I grew up with people who would maybe practice their oboe every single day, and I was like, wow, that's so impressive. He would sometimes practice all day long. Like, it was described as being obsessive, and sometimes that was all he wanted to do. And I don't know why I really like this, but he would actually practice in a barn on his parents' property. He would just be in his barn, just wailing kind of thing. And he loved jazz music, so he was just constantly playing it. And he would even go all-state jazz drummer in high school. When he was a senior, he won this big prestigious award, and this helped him get into Oberland Conservatory of Music in Ohio. And he really wanted to, he really wanted to work with Jamie Haddad, and he was just this renowned, prestigious drummer and instructor. He's one of the best in the world, and that was really one of his goals. So I've heard of Oberland, but I wasn't super familiar with it. It is a private liberal arts school, and it's in Oberland, Ohio. It's one of the oldest co-educational liberal arts colleges in the United States, and it's the second oldest to continuously operate as a co-educational institute of higher learning in the world. So that was their description, but it sounds pretty prestigious. I also noticed they only let in about 34% of applicants. Not the hardest school to get into, but significantly harder than any school I'm going to. So all of that is to really point out that, he's got some talent. He didn't just walk into the school. This isn't a community college. And we'll find too, I think a lot of people question, how do you participate in such an in-depth, difficult program and then leave school and kind of lose your mind? Just kind of keep that in mind, that this is not some guy who stayed out all night and was partying in college. It seems like he was there and dedicated to this program. Honestly, I'm not going to talk much more about his brother. I had kind of issues finding stuff on it. I could see why you wouldn't be a huge social media internet presence after going through what he's about to go through. It looks like he played baseball, and he was on the dean's list at Southern Maine, University of Southern Maine. Again, I think they're both probably pretty smart, pretty good at things. Weirdly, I couldn't find anything else on the internet about him, but it kept doing taking me to those websites where it was, this is his current address and all this stuff. And I'm like, that's not what I'm looking for right now. But yeah, so if you do listen, Cooper, maybe try to get some of that stuff hidden, because it was creeping me out. But back to Orion. As I said, he was a jazz drummer, and he wanted to do this professionally. This was his goal. And in July 2016, he's still in school. All of a sudden, his mom really starts noticing a change. There's some weird things going on. And in July is when she actually ends up calling the police for the first time. And she's, really concerned about her son. And she says, since he came home from school, he's got all of these, he keeps going on these really religious rants, and not even just Kristen, let me tell you about the Bible kind of thing. He's screaming about these things. And honestly, at the time, I think she was a little concerned about mental illness, but she was really concerned that he got messed up in some sort of religious cult. Like that's where her head went to. And he was being so erratic that she said enough's enough. She called the cops and they end up putting him in a hospital temporarily. And he goes without even fighting, right? He didn't put up this big, they didn't have to drug him to get him in. He just sort of walks into the hospital and he starts getting treated and then seems to be doing better and goes back to school. And I don't think this is honestly that rare, right? Like, I think it's a stressful time in a lot of, kids' lives. I don't even want to say kids, but I think he's approaching 20. To me, it's not, you know what I mean? It's just because somebody gets put in the hospital around that time, I'm not going to be like crazy, right? And he went back to school. He was still getting good grades. He seemed to be functioning normally.
Did they diagnose him with anything, or they just said like he had a bout with an episode of depression or, I don't know, psychosis? I have no idea. Did they actually diagnose him with anything? And maybe you don't know, but like growing up, did he have any other symptoms or signs like this or anything like that?
I think that this was out of the norm, right? This was definitely out of the norm. His mom was so concerned, his parents were so concerned, they called the cops. So I think if you were in and out of psychiatric treatment, maybe you wouldn't be quite as confused as to what's going on. I couldn't find anything that specifically said what he was diagnosed with that time, but I think they were starting to come up with some diagnosis around bipolar and things like that. But yeah, I couldn't find anything where they were like, this is clearly what's going on. Just take this pill and you'll be fine. No, but he did go back to school. He only had a year left and he did well. I mean, there was no other reports, at least that I'm finding within that time frame. From all accounts, it seems like he went to the hospital. They were kind of able to get him back on track and he was doing okay. Until he graduates in May of 2017, and he's even offered to go on tour with this jazz band. I'm not sure why he was really thinking about it and stuff, but yeah, he was kind of in the process of deciding whether he wanted to go that route. I don't know, maybe he wanted to try to find a different band or something, but good on him for even thinking about it, because I think if I was offered my dream job right out of college, I would have been like, sign me up, okay. Deal. But yeah, he was kind of thinking about it, weighing his options. But during this time, he's also becoming more and more erratic, and he's like changing his mind, and he's all over the place. His parents, they're getting concerned. This again isn't normal behavior. It's not normal behavior for him, especially. So what's going on? Mm-hmm. And one of the things was he suddenly wanted to up and drop everything and drive to Chicago. Which Chicago from Boston, especially if you're not in the United States, is not a quick trip. I don't know the exact math on that, but it's far. It's almost the other side of the country, right? Well, obviously we're in the middle, but you know what I mean? This is not, hey, you want to drive to Indiana today? Like that's a far drive. And he was serious that his parents wouldn't just drop everything and drive with him to Chicago.
But what like, was in Chicago?
He doesn't really say. He's not like, I need to go bask in Lake Michigan. Like, oh, he's just like, Mom, we have to go to Chicago. And she's like, yeah, no, I have to go to work. And he's furious. Like, no, you're not just, why aren't you just dropping everything? And to her, she's like, you're an adult, man. You get it. You should get it. You really don't understand why we can't drop everything and go to Chicago. And so he gets really mad, whatever. She goes to work and he actually steals her car. He takes her van. And obviously any parent's going to be frustrated, right? Your kid steals your car. You're annoyed. You're what's going on. But the thing that freaked her out was that she actually realized that he had left his phone and stuff. This isn't 94. This is 2017. It's rare that a kid's going to leave without his phone, right? Mm-hmm. Now she's a little like, what's going on? Why is he doing this? Again, she's like kind of in that, is he in a religious cult? Is the cult in Chicago trying to, figure things out? And it's, it's bad enough that she does it again. She calls the cops and she's stressing that she doesn't want anything to happen to him. She doesn't want him to be met with violence. She really thinks something's going on. And the cops are really trying to work with her too. I think they're taking this very seriously. This isn't one of those like, you're going to wait 48 hours, ma'am.
They're addressing it as like a mental health episode or of some sort, basically.
Yeah. Just like, we're not sure, but we we agree that we should kind of try to get to the bottom of this. They're looking around, they're kind of watching him. And then she would eventually call back and say, oh, I did hear from my son. I know where he's at. But she doesn't stress that. So she calls the cops at like noon from what the reports tell. I don't understand kind of what was going on in between there. Maybe that's just when the detective she was working with started working or something. I don't know. But this call would actually come in around, it's right before 6 a.m. And so, because they also described that she got this call in the middle of the night. And I have to disagree. Like, I think if you're a morning person, 5:55 might not be that early. I really don't know their habits at all. So I don't know. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
There's people I know that if they called me at 5 something in the morning, I'd be terrified. I'd be like, what's going on? And then there's other people where I'm like, yeah,
Hello.
Laura, I'm not surprised at all that you're up. You know what I mean? But he tells her, which again, I think is really concerning, is that he had driven 15 miles to Moody's Diner in Waldoboro. I'm sure I'm butchering all of these names. So sorry, guys. But this is 15 miles away. So, okay, well, whatever. But he leaves the van there for who knows why, but he left the van there and decides to hitchhike. Then from there, he hitchhikes to Portland, Maine, which is another 60 miles away. And he admits to that. He says that's where he ended up. But then somehow he also then ends up at the Avalon Hotel, which is right outside of Boston. And if you do the math, it's like another 70 miles away. And he's just calling from there. And he's basically like, this is what happened, Mom. Can you come get me? And obviously at this point, she's like, yes, don't leave. I'm getting in the car right now. And Buffy decides like, I'm heading to Boston. I'm going to go get my son, which is not surprising. Of course she did. So while she's there, she's going to make the 3 to 4 hour drive home and then thinks about it. And her parents live in Groton, Massachusetts. So she's like, let's just go see your grandparents. Let's stay the night there. This will give us some time to see them. Maybe she's even thinking maybe my dad can talk some sense into him, something along those lines. But they decide to head in Groton, about an hour from Boston. And I've never been there, so I'm assuming you haven't either. But it to me seems like a really wooded area. The closest I've been is Lowell, which is like 20 minutes from there. And they're very nice neighborhoods. It's really wooded. It's a smaller community. I think I read 11,000 people, but it's just a good community. They have a lower crime rate than a lot of the surrounding areas and stuff. They're just not seeing a lot of, crimes, especially a lot of murder necessarily. While this is going on, Orion reaches out to his Professor Headed that I'd already mentioned. And, they're close and I guess super close to call him up and admit, I've messed up. He says, I've stolen my mom's car. I stole money. And he says, oh, and I think I need to kill my mom. And so his professor's like, excuse me? Like, what did you just say? Thinking I must have misheard him, right? And he's like, I think I need to kill my mom. And he just says it like that, very casually. And so obviously Professor Hadid is like, what? Please stop. Can we talk about this and everything? And he's just sort of like, yeah, no, like, thanks for listening to me. I gotta go. My mom's picking me up. So thankfully, the professor didn't just take this as some joke, right? He took this threat very seriously. He's trying to call the family home. They're not answering. He can't get a hold of the family. And so he does basically the next best thing, and he calls the police. And so at this point, he even says, not only did he say, I think I need to kill my mom. He even says, I'm pretty sure my grandpa has some golf clubs there. So he's already planning it out. How would I kill my mom? Can you imagine being this professor? You're like, I do not get paid enough for this. I'm very concerned right now.
What else is, I guess, maybe alarming is if his mom was recognizing like there's some changes in him, it's noticeable. I'm pretty sure that his professor did too, right? Like he would have noticed something and then now receiving this phone call, like he's, I'm sure, urgently or desperately trying to get this family some help because he knows something's a little off. I knew it already, but now I really know it because he's just called me and said he thinks he needs to kill his mom. Now that you're getting deeper into it, I think I do remember this. So, okay.
Yeah, it's so while this is going on, I'm not exactly sure, maybe it was the professor gets a hold of the dad and the stepbrother. Sorry, not the stepbrother, the twin brother. And so the cop, and maybe I'm sorry, I am probably mixing things up, but I think that let's start over, guys. So Professor Hadid, the Rockport police now at this point, the Cooper, so the twin brother, and their dad are all calling Groton police now. By the time Hadid actually, the professor gets to him, they're like, are you calling about Orion? And he's like, yeah, how did you know? And he's like, you're like the fifth call we've received. So everybody is trying to get the Groton police to go out to the grandparents' house. So what I'm about to get into and what actually happened, probably to me, it's one of the worst parts. When you know the police are on their way there and the police are trying to intervene, but will they have enough time? So Buffy and Orion, they've now gotten to her parents' house. And so this is Frank Darby Lackey the third. I told you they had to be old money, right? Come on, listen to that name. But Elizabeth Lackey. So Frank Darby Lackey the third he was actually born in April 23rd of 1928. So he is 89 years old at the time. He's a retired investment advisor, but he's actually he shifted all of his focus to all of these different charitable things that he contributes to. He's actually the trustee of the Chawani Foundation, and they basically help and do environmental education for youth. And Elizabeth Lackey, she was 85 at the time. She was born June 18th, 1932. She does a lot of these charitable things as well. And they had been married for 61 years. Imagine how, that's just a really long time. And one of the things that really impressed me about her, because obviously around this time frame, not all women were going to college, right? But she actually got her master's degree. Clearly, this family took education seriously. And like I said, she started some different charitable organizations as well, with her husband. I think, this family's probably very well off, but they're also trying to give back. And, we see it kind of throughout. It seems like they've also instilled this in their daughter. Clearly good people, right? I couldn't find the big family conspiracy, really. They just seem to be good. One of the things is that the grandparents, they're almost 90, so they're not mobile. They're not extremely mobile. They're kind of bound to these lazy boy chairs that they've put in the kitchen area. I think this is where they eat. They watch a lot of TV, and they would have stay in nurse, right? Bertha May Parker, she is 68 years old, and she was born on July 29th, 1949. She lives there with them, right? They need full time around the care help. They can't go a day or two without this. She's there, and she was a mother. She's a mother. She loved adventure. She was known for being really faithful Christian. She would read her Bible daily. And again, all around a good person. She really dedicated her life to serving others. And Buffy would tell Bertha, hey, why don't you go take some time for yourself? I can help out here. I'm going to have dinner with my family, with my parents. You go up and enjoy yourself. She goes up and she's reading her Bible. She's doing what she would normally do in her free time. And Buffy's getting to enjoy this time with her parents. And you'd think with her son too, but Orion has gone out to the garage. What do you think he's looking for in the garage?
That golf club.
Yeah, so he goes out there, he's looking for the golf clubs, and then he comes across this old bat of his grandpa's, which, hey, it seems like that'll do the trick even better. He goes outside and he's actually using ground apples to practice swinging. And yes, he's out there, practicing, loosening up, I guess. I don't know. And then I guess he decides I'm ready. And so he walks in the house and he starts beating his mom in the head repeatedly. And his grandparents are just stuck there watching it. And obviously they're screaming at him. His grandma's like, "What are you doing?" His grandpa's telling him to stop. But can you imagine having to watch your grandson just beat your daughter to death? And the amount of cruelty that happened there, he didn't come in and swing one or two times and move on to the next. He took his time. He probably took several minutes beating his mom before then turning to his grandparents, who again are just sitting there waiting, basically.
Because they're immobile, so they can't do anything.
Yeah, they can't run away. They can't run to the phone. They're just stuck there. And so this is horrible. And obviously, so the nurse, I mean, this is a big, gorgeous, beautiful house, but there's still obviously Bertha hears some commotion going on downstairs. And she goes downstairs and sees, like, I can't help these people, right? I just got to get out of here. So she actually gets out and she's running away, just doing everything, to escape. But Orion, he couldn't let this happen, right? So he chases her down and he what does he do?
Beats her to death too.
Beats her to death and drags her back to the house and puts her in the flower bed there. You couldn't let her go because of why? You'd think, right? So you don't get caught, correct?
I mean, he sounds like he's really not all there, or he's in some other state of mind where it's not his normal self. So I'm gonna guess no, that he dragged her back because some other reason, but it wasn't so that he wouldn't get caught. Am I wrong?
No, I mean, I don't actually know the reason, because he immediately after just walks into the woods and throws the bat. He takes all of his clothes off, so he's completely naked, and then just walks to a neighbor's house. And yeah, so this is gonna be the Wagner. So imagine that it's not very far, but you have to walk through the woods. So this isn't like, hey, your neighbor right over here, right? You walk through the woods. And so the Wagner, so Mr. Wagner, the neighbor, he's actually standing outside and he just sees this naked man covered in dirt walk out of the woods. So he did the right thing and walked into the house immediately.
I don't want no parts of that shit.
Yeah. And so he's like, so this guy, right? This naked guy just walks up to the house casually and knocks on the door and says, "I need help. I need help." And then calmly says, "I've just murdered 4 people." So what do, right? He immediately calls 911, of course. And he's really concerned. It's cold outside and this guy's naked. He's clearly pretty young. Once he's closer, he realizes, hey, he's pretty young. And he has these little cuts all over him. I think it really seems in their head, they're like, him and his wife are like, this guy's probably on drugs or having some sort of mental breakdown. I think in your head, you're still trying to assume that he didn't actually just kill 4 people, right? Kind of giving him the benefit of the doubt. But they call 911 immediately. And they're telling 911 what happened. The 911's trying to get the cops out there. And he wants to give this kid a towel or something. And they're like, I would not recommend going out there. And then he's like, correction, do not go out there. They just let him sit out there. And that's exactly what he's doing. He's just sitting out there. And so the cops get there and they're talking to this young man. And right away, they note how calm he is. So he's not frantic. He's not any of those kind of things. He just seems very calm and laid back. And he's just answering the questions like me and you are talking right now. And it's creepy, right? Because he's saying, hey, I just killed 4 people. And they say, okay, where are these 4 people that you've killed? And he just points to the woods where he came out of. And he's like, through there. And so they're like, again, I think they're in the same mindset. They're praying this actually didn't happen, that he's just full blown lost his mind. But
Wait, I'm sorry, quick question. Does he
mhm.
have blood on him? I would think if you're bludgeoning 4 people, you've got to have blood all over you. Or what are the tiny cuts that they're seeing? Is that the blood splatter from bashing them with the bat?
No, I think it's truly cuts. I think maybe he did have some defensive wounds, or well, fine. Maybe it's just this is disgusting, but bone fragment and stuff coming
Oh
back
my
out and hitting
gosh.
him. Nobody describes a bunch of blood, but they definitely say he's got mud all over him. I don't know if like he'd
The
removed his
mud looks
clothes.
like blood.
Well, I think maybe he'd removed his clothes because those are clearly going to be just full of blood, right? And then I don't know if he tried to use dirt to get some of the blood off of him or what. Because how do you get a bunch of dirt on you? Also, I don't know. Again, very bizarre. So, quick recap: man walks out of the woods completely naked, covered in mud and little cuts. That's all they know. They're asking him all these questions still, right? And then he just starts singing to himself. It's really creepy. And then eventually he would say, I freed them. And then goes back to singing to himself. So, like, again, it's kind of got some religious cult undertones to it. They don't know what to think. It's really weird. And eventually they do give him a white bed sheet to cover up with. So you can actually see when the cops are taking him away, that's all he's wearing is this white bed sheet. And he's just sitting there in this white bed sheet singing to himself. And now the cops have to go through the daunting task of actually going and they do the 300-yard hike to the house. And when they come across, they find 80 Common Street. So, and they're just praying, right? They're praying that this was all a misunderstanding. They walk up, they can see there's a light on, they can hear, and they recognize the TV is on. But then right away, when they're looking through this window, they notice 2 bloody victims. So they instantly break into the house. And what they find is disgusting. So they walk through this really long kitchen, and this whole kitchen is covered in blood, but not just blood. It's covered in brain tissue, skull tissue, bone fragments, and it's all over. This was not just I'm gonna put them out of their mercy and free them situation. This was brutal. This was inhumane. He destroyed these people. They find Orion's mother, and she has a hole so big in her skull that you can just see inside of her head.
Oh my gosh, Ashley, no.
Yeah. And then again, I think it's one of the saddest parts. They're sitting there. Obviously, they're realizing how horrible this is, how honestly disgusting this is, what really happened. And then they go outside, and that's where they find the nurse that has been beaten to death and drugged back and dumped in the flower bed. So it's all sad. It's all horrible. So to me, there's something about the nurse, though. We're really just there, wrong place, wrong time. You were literally just doing a shift and you tried to get away. I'm sure as you're running towards the woods, you're running for your life, and then he catches up to you. Yeah, it's all horrible. It's all next level. So that one really got me. But right away, the town's freaking out. And there was actually a misreporting pretty quickly on saying a Groton man had done this. So everybody is obviously trying to figure out like who this killer is, how did this happen? Again, they're not used to seeing this kind of crime, so they're very freaked out. Everybody's sort of up in arms, but the cops come out right away and say this is an isolated incident. Do not worry, we have them, we have the murderer and things like that. But still, nobody really knows how this happened. They haven't released the name, so they're really trying to figure it out. So they finally do a press release, and they're out there, they're talking about the case. They really start with the grandparents and the nurse. And so still everyone's like trying to understand, but then they get to Buffy Krause, and it all starts to add up to everybody more that he was related to them, that this was his mom and his grandparents. So still horrible. I think this is one of those cases where knowing the truth doesn't really help you. It doesn't bring you answers. It doesn't bring you comfort. But I guess at least, if anything, they know there's not some wild, deranged killer on the loose. If you can get any satisfaction out of this, or any comfort from this, I mean. He was charged with 4 counts of first-degree murder. He wouldn't end up going to court for 4 years. So during this time, he would originally plead not guilty, and his lawyer had stated, like, for obvious reasons, that they're going to go after not guilty due to mental insanity. And during this time, he was housed in a mental facility where he started to get treatment. He's speaking to doctors and things like that. So everybody's, pretty confident that that's going to be their argument. But the prosecution actually, they go back, they look at the situation, they look at, he doesn't have this long record, right? It truly seems like he really just sort of had this mental breakdown. So they offer him second-degree murder, which would be life in prison, and then the possibility of parole after 25 years. So, Orion decides, hey, yes, I'm going to take the plea deal, which I think is just interesting, because I think, like, this would be one of those rare cases, right, where you're like, he's really got an argument that, do you know what I mean? That he was insane at the time of the murders. So I found it interesting that he would take it. What do you think?
I mean, I think he might have taken it because he felt terrible and was like, how can you live with yourself outside of being in a prison? You know what I'm saying? If you know that you did something that horrific and now you just have to just go on with your life, even if you're in a psychiatric ward or whatever, but still you have to process what you did. Or maybe he was in fear that he might do it again. I don't know. But I don't know.
The court they actually had to go through it with him, make sure he was of sound mind to
understand,
accept the plea and all this stuff, and that nobody's kind of forcing him to do it. And he does seem, to be remorseful. I'll say in the beginning, he seems really calm. Again, just, I don't want to say chipper, but like, if it was me there, I would not be answering those questions the same way. But once they really start getting into the details and everything, he genuinely seems pretty upset. And we start to get a little more information onto what the doctors are saying they think is wrong with him. He says that they found that he's bipolar with psychotic features, and that basically they're in the process of diagnosing him with schizophrenia. I know they won't just do with schizophrenia, so I have a feeling like it's like, yeah, we all know you have schizophrenia. We're just, taking the proper procedures to actually get him diagnosed. So he sounds remorseful. This is a side note. One of the things I thought that was kind of funny was Nancy Grace actually thought this was like a true case of mental insanity, which she never buys that defense. And so she was actually talking about how she's almost a little worried that they let him take this because now you have someone with schizophrenia in a jail system, which could just honestly be dangerous for everybody involved. But that was like, geez, even Nancy Grace has shown a little compassion for him, which is rare. But again, he seems to truly be remorseful. And one of the things that I think kind of got to me during all this was his aunt was talking about how hard this has been, because obviously, right, she wants to mourn her parents, she wants to mourn her sister, she wants to hate their murderer, but it's her nephew, and she also genuinely is concerned for him, and no matter how much she wants to turn it off, she still loves him. And so she says that really took away from the mourning process and being able to process it, and for the family to even move on, because instantly now they're worried, is this going to be taken care of properly, and is he going to be okay, and things like that. So I think him having to listen to his aunt to kind of, stuck with him. And, it was, I'm sure, really hard to hear. And, it's just, she has to say though, that she'll never forget him because she'll never forgive him because of the complete cruelty and darkness and inhumanity that happened to her family that day. She's acknowledging that, hey, that was that was horrible. And no matter what, even if you're schizophrenic, I'm not just going to be able to say mental illness. So it was just too much. And the nurse's daughter also spoke on behalf of, her mom and her family. And I think that got to him a lot too. And he admits that he has also now turned to Christ, and he extends all his love to the family, and he apologized even specifically to Bertha's family. And he added that he's glad and knows that she's with her Lord. So, I don't know what to say. He seems very calm about it, but I'm sure if you were truly having a psychotic break, you didn't hate your mom, and you basically woke up and realized you'd butchered half your family, that's probably a lot to take in. So that's it. He's still in jail. He'll be eligible for parole in, now probably about 24 years. And we'll see if he actually gets out. I will add that if you liked this case, you want to hear more, you want to hear actual interviews, I highly, highly recommend episode 214 of Sword and Scale. So sorry if you're not a Sword and Scale fan or a Mike Boudet fan, I understand, but I'm an asshole for life. Me and Kristen sort of started off with, that's what turned us into true crime junkies. So I highly recommend it. It's one of the few podcasts that has covered it, and they do an amazing job. So if you're interested, check it out. If you've not listened to Sword and Scale, it's going to be next month of you binging. So enjoy.
Thanks, Ashley.
Thanks, everyone. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you're enjoying your holiday season that's starting now, no matter what you're celebrating. So just enjoy it. We love you guys. We'll see you back in a couple of weeks. And please, please take a little time and rate and review us. Thank you.